Hi, I'm Vern Coates from Marion, Iowa. I play golf at Indian Creek Country Club, and this is Golf Smarter episode number 975.
Think of a pyramid. The most important part of the pyramid, obviously, is the foundation. If we don't have a wide base and foundation, the top's not going to stay put. So in any building, we want a solid foundation, and then you always start with that. You can't start a building by building the roof first. It just doesn't work. So our foundation has to be rotary mobility. And golfers, they're like, oh yeah, I know I need to be flexible, but people don't like to do flexibility work because number one, they may not know exactly what they need to do. It's like, I can stretch my quads, I can stretch my hamstrings, I might do a few trunk rotations like this, but is that really going to make a measurable difference? And so what we found is that, number one, measure the areas where we need to rotate better. And for a golfer, those are the four key areas where we need to rotate are your neck, so you can actually turn and see the ball. If you just do a trunk turn with your body and then you try and backswing position, then I try and rotate my head to look at the ball, I need a good amount of neck rotation. And for people that, if they start to turn their head, or if you notice if you're driving and you kind of have to turn your whole body to check behind you, golfers would have to do a shoulder check. They're finding that the neck's tight. That's a sure sign that your neck mobility is limited.
Playing your best golf after turning 50, 60, or even 70 with Josh Lays.
This is Golf Smarter. Sharing stories, tips, and insights from great golf minds to help you lower your score and raise your golf IQ. Here's your host, Fred Green.
Welcome to the Golf Smarter podcast, Josh.
Hey, thanks for having me, Fred. Appreciate being here.
Yeah, it's excited about this conversation because you're from Par for Success, which we've spoken to Chris Finn many times on this podcast. And we talked about exercise, fitness for golf. And that's really what you guys specialize in, is fitness for golf. But today our topic is something very close to my heart, and that is fitness for golfers over 50, over 60, over 70.
Over 7, maybe even over 80. Why not?
I would love to be able to do that because the ultimate goal is to be able to shoot your age. I think that is the ultimate. Hole-in-one is a nice, lucky thing to happen.
Yes.
But there is a way to really prepare yourself to be able to shoot your age. That should be the goal for every golfer, right?
I think when you're young, Fred, maybe shooting your age for 9 holes would be great. But yes, once we get into our 60s and beyond, and I've talked to many people. I've had the pleasure of being in conversation with many members here that are in-house and remote clients that are so thrilled to tell us that thanks so much for helping me shoot my age. Like, it never gets old. And that's one of the thrills of the game, is being able to play as long as you wish. So our mission is simply to help golfers achieve longevity. We just define that as you being able to play at whatever level you want for as long as you want, or whatever level you deem enjoyable. So that's what we love doing here.
Yeah, I love, shoot your age. You said it. What did you say? You said shoot your age no matter how old you get. Well, like we hope to be getting there.
That's right.
So, but I think what we need to do, let's not start at the older end. Let's start at the younger end and talk about the things that we can do. I think because for me, I remember what I learned about turning 40 was that everything that I did in playing sports growing up, like, oh, I hurt myself. Yeah, I'll be fine in a few minutes. And as you get older, that few minutes becomes a couple days. When I hit 40, it just took a lot longer to recover from minor injuries than it did in the past. And it was like, I got to learn to be patient. And is this what's going to be happening the rest of my life?
Yeah, it's that is the downside, Fred, of aging. And
but
one
the
of the
upside
things
is, let me just say, the upside to aging is you're aging.
Yeah,
because you consider the alternative is not good.
Exactly. Right. We're still operating. We're breathing. So that is every day we can do that. That's great. Well, a funny story is one of the things that reminded me of getting older was when my daughter broke her arm. A cast. They had set a pin in one of the bones in her forearm, and I said, "Oh, how long is she gonna have the cast on?" He said, "Oh, 2 weeks. She'll be fine." I said, 2 weeks? Isn't it usually like 4 to 6? He's like, she's 8 years old. She'll be fine. So when you're really young, the bones aren't brittle yet. But yeah, what golfers can start to do as they get older, what we typically see, Fred, and this is based on our research, and that's what we love to do here. We love to compile research and data, physical data, on every golfer that we work with. So not only does that include swing data, but we've got the physical metrics on what their mobility is like and what their strength and power are like. So we can tell you physically someone in their 20s, 30s, 40s, every decade through the 70s and 80s, what the relative norms are. So golfers can know what to expect and what's possible and where they're at. So we can set really realistic goals and say, hey, if you're only at the 30th percentile for club head speed for your age group, there's no reason to think that you can't get to the top 25% with some work. So that's really encouraging to golfers. But like you said, on the aches and pains side, golfers typically, as they age every decade, we see not only are the aches and pains going to take a little bit longer to go away, but we can mitigate that and we can minimize that by doing the right things. And we'll get into that. But about every decade, we see after 30. So once you kind of, like you said, start your 40s, every decade we see about a 5 mile an hour drop off in club head speed. So
at least.
Yeah. So that's the average. Some golfers are more, some are less, but the average is about 5 miles an hour per decade. So that amounts to, it's probably probably talking 15 yards every 10 years.
Wow. That's a lot.
It can be. So we get calls from people all the time that are concerned, obviously, because, hey, I'm in my mid 60s now and I've lost like 30 yards. It didn't seem like that long ago, but from 5-10 years ago, I'm down 25, 30 yards. And that's really, really common.
And really, really frustrating.
For sure. Because golfers are used to playing, a certain part of the golf course with their buddies. They play whatever it is, the blue tees or the white tees. And if everyone's playing from one tee block and you're all of a sudden finding it difficult to reach par fours in regulation, and you have no hope at reaching par fives in two, and maybe, you're just lucky to get a short club in your hands on your third shot, that's where golfers can get frustrated. And that's where we love to help them, because actually helping a golfer realize that you don't need to do a lot of crazy things to improve and get better and hit the ball further and hurt less. You just have to do a few simple things really, really consistently. And that's what we love to do.
And that's what we want to talk about. Simple things
For
to
sure.
do, because, a lot of golfers, their whole warm up is going out to the driving range before their round of golf, doing a couple of arm up, both arms up, bend over once or twice, swing.
Try and touch your toes, maybe.
Maybe try to touch your toes. And my favorite is swinging 2 clubs at once.
There you
It's
go.
like, okay, I'm ready to go. And they pull out the driver. What are you doing?
Yeah. And there's lots of things that we can do to get golfers not only warmed up, but to help them recover after they're playing. Because usually after a golfer is done playing, especially if you walk the course, if you've got any more than a 5-minute drive home, the body starts to cool off, or maybe you have a drink or two in the grill room, and then you get in your car, and then you get out of your car, and you takes more than 30 seconds to sort of get into an upright position when you're trying to get out of your chair. So those are the things that we get a lot of sort of complaints about with golfers, is that they're just, hey, I'm starting to feel old and I don't really like it anymore. We try and simplify it for people and to take a very broad approach. There's a couple, we'd like to talk about how we're going to help people get better. So I'd like to share a little bit about that and just give you the illustration of think of a pyramid, right? So, the most important part of the pyramid obviously is the foundation, because if we don't have a wide base in the foundation, the top it's not going to stay put. So in any building, we want a solid foundation, and then you always start with that. You can't start a building by building the roof first. It just doesn't work. So our foundation has to be rotary mobility. And golfers, they're like, oh yeah, I know I need to be flexible. But people don't like to do flexibility work. Because number one, they may not know exactly what they need to do, right? It's like, well, I can stretch my quads, I can stretch my hamstrings, I might do a few trunk rotations like this, but what is that really going to make a measurable difference, right? And so what we found is that if we actually, number one, measure the areas where we need to rotate better, right? And that for a golfer, those are the four key areas where we need to rotate are your neck, so you can actually turn and see the ball. If you imagine me, the golfers that are just listening, if you just do a trunk turn with your body and then you try and into a backswing position, then I try and rotate my head to look at the ball, I need a good amount of neck rotation. And for people that actually, if they start to turn their head, or if you notice if you're driving and you kind of have to turn your whole body to check behind you, we have the luxury of those backup cameras now. But before that, golfers would have to actually, to do a shoulder check. They're finding that the neck's tight. That's a sure sign that your neck mobility is limited. So that's going to limit one, your ability to make a big turn and keep your eye on the ball. Number two, we need to rotate your trunk and your spine. And then number three is your shoulders, which are going to be more in control of the club path. So golfers that are taught, if they want to be more consistent, they want to eliminate a slice. We know that right shoulder, trail shoulder, if we're talking about right-handed golfers, it's the right shoulder. That needs good rotation this way, external rotation. So if I take my arm in a 90-degree position, I try and point my thumb way back behind me, we want to see that forearm get well behind you like that. And if it's only getting to parallel to or perpendicular to the ground, then it's definitely limited. That's going to allow you to shallow the club on the downswing. So for golfers that are complaining of over the top move, and if you feel like, you're trying to arch your back to do that, that's probably a sure sign that, my shoulder might not rotate enough. So that's going to be a reason why golfers come over the top, which is a distance killer as well. And the last one is the hips. It wasn't Happy Gilmore, it was Chubbs Peterson. He said, it's all in the hips, right? It's all in the hips, Happy. So if our hips don't rotate, the hips are essentially the connection between your lower body and your upper body, but they're not, if our hips don't rotate well enough, Fred, your body is not going to be able to make a good weight shift and help you get onto your lead side in the golf swing, which is essentially what's going to create a lot of your club head speed is that weight shift from trail side to lead side. So we make sure from a mobility standpoint that foundation is really, really solid. And then we start to build up.
So as you're explaining each of these moves, I'm sitting here trying to do them, and you're watching me, and I'm like, ow. Right. I'm trying to make my arm go straight back, and I can't get it past 45 degrees, and it hurts. It hurts my shoulder. It's like, wait a minute. I thought I was a flexible person. And
you probably were at one time.
Thanks, guy. And it's not going very well right now. So I don't know where to begin here. This is we started about 40-year-olds, but I'm going right to close to 70 here. Let's do more shoulders and hips. And I do stretches pretty much 5 days a week. I'll spend half hour, 45 minutes doing things. But I guess I'm not doing enough. Although,
it may not be that you're not doing enough. It's just making sure that we're doing the right things. That's the big key. So that's again why we test those things. So we'll test people, every 2 to 4 weeks on their mobility, because you can actually make significant measurable gains in your ability to rotate in a couple weeks, and that's usually what we see. Some like measurable progress. So the hip test, actually, we didn't get into that one, but our hips need to internally rotate. So that would be like me. For anybody that can see, if I'm sitting and I try and rotate my thigh like this, if you're sitting and you try and rotate so your shin actually moves outwards like that. For golfers, that if your shin only rotates a little bit and you're trying to not lean to the side and you're just trying to rotate your thigh and knee inward so your foot goes out, if we don't have close to 45 degrees of rotation this way with the hip, that's a significant limitation. Most golfers are like, I'm getting a cramp in my hip when I do that motion. That's probably a sign that your hip rotation is limited. And the lead side, the left side, is actually left side for a right-handed golfer is going to be where we need the most internal rotation, because that rotation is where you actually post up on this lead side. So that's where we need a lot of that internal rotation. So if you're having trouble getting onto your lead side, and if you're having trouble posting up and shifting weight, that is a real primary area that we usually target with golfers. So that is really key. So we measure it, we test it, and if golfers don't pass, in terms of how many degrees they're rotating, we just give them a very specific targeted plan for hip rotation where we can gain, 5, 10, 15 degrees of hip rotation in a month or two. And that gets them to a spot where not only will they see improvements in how their swing feels and I'm able to get onto my lead side, but we'll see that golfers don't have the stiff lower back that they usually have after playing golf. Because if those hips don't rotate, if you just think of a ball and socket joint, that ball and socket's designed to rotate, which is your hip socket. If they don't rotate and they're stuck, guess what's going to compensate? Body goes up the chain and asks the lower back, hey, can you move a little bit more than you really should to help out these hips that don't rotate? So the lower back typically side bends and twists in an effort to kind of get through the swing. And that's where the lower back takes a lot of the stress. So all the parts are somewhat connected, but it's really important for golfers to understand that rotary mobility is that foundation of the pyramid. Usually golfers will look to, one of 4 places to try and improve their performance. The first 2 places they'll usually look for are technique, which makes sense, like taking lessons. Seeing a pro is great. And then equipment. Those would be the first 2 places golfers will usually try and improve. Mm-hmm. If you think of 4 pieces of the pie, we've got our technique. So seeing a golf pro working on your skills, that can be great. But if you can't physically move into the positions where a teacher is trying to get you to, it's going to be difficult for the instructor to see big improvements because, this person can't rotate their trunk. They can't rotate their hips. They're really stiff. I'm going to have to work around these limitations. Mm-hmm. Whereas if we get the golfer to move correctly, then all of a sudden those technical issues in the swing, over the top or early extension, or maybe they've got a chicken wing finish. A lot of those technical issues are actually, they're because of a physical restriction. So the problem, it's not a technical issue in the swing. It's just a physical restriction that's presenting as a technical problem in the swing because your body will just work within its physical limits. So we just have to.
I'm curious about that. Should an instructor just okay, I can see your physical limitations. Let's make your swing. I know you want more consistency and you want more distance, but you can't get there with the body you're working with. And if you're not willing to work on that body, let's try to figure that out.
That definitely has to be a conversation between the pro and the golfer. But most golfers, number one, they want to hit it further and they want to hit it straighter, obviously. And they want to hurt less in the process. So if the person's physical body isn't allowing them to make any progress in the swing, you obviously are going to have to, I think at the bare minimum, the instructor should be able to see that there's a restriction and that they could refer out to someone like us to say, hey, this person needs help rotating. Can you help them? And then we definitely, that's what we usually see with people that are starting with this is that my golf pro is trying to get me to this position in the backswing or to start my downswing with getting onto my lead hip. And then we go and measure their lead hip and it's only got 15 degrees of rotation when that lead hip should get 45 degrees of rotation. Well, it's actually not a surprise that you can't get onto your lead hip. It's not that you're not trying. It's not that the brain is saying, okay, get onto your lead hip. Come on. But the body is, if there's a physical restriction, we just need to work around that. So that's where often, golfers will go to technique. They'll go to equipment, but mobility and then strength and power are the other 2 pieces of that puzzle. And that's where golfers will usually look last. Obviously I'm biased. I think we should go there first because make sure your body can physically handle the demands of what we're trying to get it to do. Because physically, the golf swing is a daunting task to actually place that club, that sweet spot on a golf. The sweet spot's probably, about the size of a quarter. And you're trying to move a club head anywhere from probably 80 to 100 plus miles an hour in the span of less than 2 seconds. It's a minor miracle that golfers actually make contact with the ball.
You're a lot of help.
Yeah.
I just want to let the podcast listeners know that, it sounded as if Josh kind of got far away from the microphone, which he did because on video he had to move back so he can show us, and we were able to see his whole body. So I just want you to know that I will go ahead and put this entire interview on video on YouTube. If you go to YouTube at Golf Smarter, you'll be able to see this interview, and you'll see exactly what Josh was doing. But for those listening, thank you. and let's carry on. Okay. So you're saying there's 4 parts. So the technique, then equipment, then 3 and 4 would be
mobility, and then strength and power.
Okay.
Yeah. So mobility, Fred, we want to think of mobility as essentially, if you imagine a runway and an airplane.
Okay.
The simple analogy is the runway needs to be long enough so the plane can take off and land.
Right.
And certain planes, if they're bigger and have bigger engines and they're faster, they're going to need a longer runway. The golf swing, obviously, depending on how fast you're going, we need enough runway or rotary mobility, which is your space in your body to swing freely without restrictions so that you can get into good positions in your swing and swing at speed. You need rotary mobility to have that runway to swing at speed. And if we don't have enough runway or room to rotate, this is where we're going to see those compensations in your swing. And if you don't have that room to rotate, your body just ends up banging into brick walls every time you swing, which is over time, if someone doesn't address it, the aches and pains get worse, and eventually we have an injury.
You were just finishing up by saying that we're going to have an injury if we go that direction. But for people who have had injuries, who are recovering from injuries, whether it's a broken arm, broken leg, or maybe even had back surgery or something, they're going to need to almost go to ground zero. They can't just pick up where they left off, right, to get back to a good place. They got to really kind of start from the ground up, don't they?
That's a great question, Fred. For people, and this is something that our physical therapists deal with on a day-to-day basis, is people that have had surgeries, knee surgeries, hip surgeries,
knee
back
replacements,
surgeries.
Hip replacements. I mean, I have a lot of friends that are in that part of life.
It's super common as you get into your 60s and above that we see joint replacements. And if the rehab is done correctly, the joint you should be able to actually access more range of motion in that joint than prior to. Because the reason that joint was replaced is that it wasn't moving. There was bone on bone. So now that you have a new joint, we should be able to physically move that joint in a further range of motion. And this is where people often may get a little bit hesitant because they're afraid that they're going to re-injure their hip. But once you get past the rehab phase, which is anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks, and that should be done, to restore that full range of motion. And the rehab part of it is, especially with knees and hips, it's not comfortable. I'm not going to lie to you, but as you probably heard from your friends, but if you're willing to go through that and have full range of motion in the joint, we're not necessarily starting at ground zero, but a lot of the time before people had the surgery, their mobility was not in a great spot to begin with, which ultimately, if we don't have good mobility, that's where the joints are going to wear out prematurely, and going to have more wear and tear. So making sure that, number one, if someone has a surgery, they get a joint replaced, we look at each person and say, okay, well, let's test everything and see where it is. Let's measure your mobility. And we also measure strength and power too. But let's measure your mobility and see where we're at. And then we know what areas that we need to focus on. Because if someone's trunk rotates really well and someone doesn't need to improve their trunk rotation, then we don't need to spend extra time rotating on the trunk. We need to keep it in a good spot and maintain it. But if their hips don't rotate very well, then, and that's the most common, I would say, area of struggle for golfers is internal hip rotation. And that's the challenging one. So that's where we would spend most of the time focusing on improving that one area that needs the most attention. And people, again, it doesn't take a lot of time to make significant improvements in your rotation.
As long as you're doing it correctly.
Yes, exactly. So that's where we would, set somebody up with a coach and make sure that you're doing the exercises properly. We do a combination of soft tissue releases. So we teach people where their muscles are that are causing the restriction, and we teach them how to do some manual therapy or self myofascial release or trigger point release for those muscles, so that the muscle can actually calm down and relax. And then we'll give them 2 or 3 mobility exercises to follow up on that soft tissue release, working within a healthy end range of motion. So we're trying to basically reestablish a new end range of motion for that joint. So we're basically helping you find out where your limit is in your end range of motion, and then gradually improve that with each workout, so that someone within 2 weeks, they're usually seeing, about 5 degrees, sometimes 10 degrees increase in range of motion. Especially in the hips, because we want to see a 45 degrees of internal rotation. And often people start in the 20s. Most of the guys in their 60s, they're probably starting between 15 and 25, sometimes around 30. But that extra 15 degrees difference makes a big impact when you're trying to get onto that lead side in your golf swing.
People who are trying to always increase the distance on their drives, on their shots, am I under the false impression that you need to get stronger to do that? Or is it really that you need better mobility and flexibility to get through it, to get the greater distance? Or is it a combination of the two? How would you assess that?
Yeah, you said it exactly right, Fred. It is both. Mobility, as I said before, if we think of that pyramid of kind of golf performance, mobility is the base. So that's where we start. Mm-hmm. The next level up that we're going to try and build to make sure your swing and your game can handle playing into your 70s and 80s is strength and power. So that's the next physical area we need to unlock for somebody. So if you think about, as I said before, the golf swing takes place in less than 2 seconds, and we're swinging anywhere from probably 80 to 100 miles an hour plus, depending on your age and ability and skill. So the golf swing is a power sport. It's a power event. Like it's just like doing a throwing sport, pitching a baseball. Like it is power. So unfortunately, a lot of golfers, when they're thinking about training physically, they might do 45 minutes on the treadmill or a cardio machine. I might do some bicep curls and some light squats, and they're doing 10 to 15 reps times 3 sets at lightweight. Well, that might help you walk the golf course a little better. But when it comes to hitting the ball further, we need to actually learn to move an implement really, really fast and get good at that. So to get good at that, we actually need to build an engine that can handle creating force. And that's, strength is simply how much force can you apply to something, whether you're trying to pick something up or push it. That's strength. Power or speed power is simply how fast you can do it. How fast can you apply that force? And that's what we're looking for in golf. So we need to train by making sure that we can apply force and get stronger. And then we train the golfer to apply that force relatively quickly. So we need to train strength and power to increase the size of that engine. If we don't increase the size of somebody's engine, then they're going to continue swinging. And mobility will probably prevent somebody from getting maybe some major injuries and aches and pains. But if you do not increase your ability to create power and apply force, then your club head speed is not going to go up. It will go down as you age. So now the upside is it doesn't take working out 2 hours a day to get stronger. We can see results with somebody in 90 minutes a week. If you're willing to do 3 times 30-minute workouts in a week, you will get stronger if you're doing the right things.
Wow, that's awesome to know. So, strength and speed, but there's also lack of tension, right?
Exactly, yeah. So I wouldn't say so much lack of tension, but when you talk about, I'm just thinking you're referring to mobility and flexibility and that lack of tension. We need to have the muscles strong, but being able to rotate through a full range of motion, right? Uh-huh. So having the ability to access mobility or your rotary mobility and rotate through the swing, that's the mobility piece, that foundation, and then having the strength to actually move that implement, that golf club really fast. And we're doing that by, you can create force against the handle of the club, and you can create force against the ground. Those are the only two things that we have, the ability to put force against to create speed in your swing. The ground is a lot bigger than the handle. So that is our best best possibility to gain club head speed, is getting you better at pushing against the ground. So that looks like squats, it looks like lunges, it looks like hinging motions or deadlifts done properly. All those things help you push against the ground, which ultimately is going to give you the ability to create club head speed.
Interesting. Now, what I find kind of amusing is we tried to start talking, okay, at age 40, do this, age 50, right? But I'm getting the sense of what you're saying, that it really doesn't matter how old you are, whether you're 40, 50, 60, or beyond, 70 and beyond, that it's pretty much doing the same type of thing consistently that's going to help.
Exactly, Fred. Yeah, that's what what we see when we capture the data and measurements on people, is that based on every age category, yes, we're going to see people in their 60s swinging probably 5 miles an hour less than people in their 50s. Like I said, every decade you're going to lose 5 miles an hour, but there is a range of club head speed. So everybody can improve at any age. You can go from the 50th percentile in your age category to the 80th percentile. You can go from the 20th to the 70th. And for those people that are, they're already near the top for their age category, they might be in the 80th percentile for speed, but they might say, hey, I want to compete with guys that are younger than me. And that's when it gets really fun, is golfer that's in their 60s is like, I'm playing with 45, 50-year-olds. I want to keep up with them. And
no, you don't. You want to beat them.
Yeah. And, scoring but scoring becomes easier when you can hit it further, obviously. But for those people, it's really fun when we start to get stronger, and when we're measuring power, we just get somebody to jump. We measure their vertical jump, and we measure their ability to throw a medicine ball from a seated position. We measure their chest pass, how far you can throw it. So those two simple tests really are going to show us how much force you can put down against the ground and how much force you can exert with your upper body against an object. And as simple as it sounds, we can pretty much tell when somebody does those two tests what their club head speed is going to be.
At Par for Success, you guys are based in the Midwest, if I remember correctly?
Actually, on the eastern side of the state, or in the country. We're based out of Raleigh, North Carolina.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But do you work with people remotely or just in person?
Actually, we do both. So we have our facility is about 10 minutes from the Raleigh airport. And so we have physical therapists in-house full-time, as well as strength and conditioning coaches. So we do fitness and one-on-one strength training, as well as physical therapy for golfers. But actually the big fastest growing part of our company has been the remote coaching. So three quarters of our clients are outside the building.
Oh, wow. Great.
Yeah.
Great. And answer me, why is it that younger people, and it sure seems this way to me when I'm playing, that it's younger people who ride and the more older guys are walking. Although, there are definitely older guys that are riding, and there's some courses that you can only ride, right? But do you advocate walking a golf course, from the fitness side of it?
Mm. That's a good question, Fred. And again, it's going to depend on the golfer and where they play. Like you said, some golf courses just aren't designed to be able to walk, which I'm a walker. I love to walk the golf course. I mean, obviously I ride probably 20% of my rounds, but whenever I can, I walk. And I just find it gives me time to think between shots. I tend to play better when I walk, but it depends on the person. So some people are just like, hey, I just want to be able to play and not have aches and pains, and I want to hit the ball further. I don't feel like I have, I don't, my golf course, it's a really tough walk. I'm like, you just need to be able to, if you ride all the time, you need to be able to swing the club, and you still have to walk a certain distance. but you may not be able to, you may not need to walk up all these hills if you're riding a cart. So the demands are going to be different. If somebody wants to walk, that's great. Then we need to make sure the golfer has the physical ability to, and the endurance to walk the golf course several times a week, depending on how many times they play. Or if they've got an upcoming trip, like some of these places, if you're going to go to Scotland or England or Ireland, like it's walking only. So there's not a choice. And if you're going to play 6, 7, 8 days in a row and it's walking only, we would definitely prepare somebody for that if they're not used to walking on a regular basis. And some of the courses in the States now, the resorts like Bandon and the one in Sand Valley, a lot of those resorts now are basically walking only.
Yeah, Chambers Bay. I played Chambers Bay this past summer, and one of the guys that I was with from Chicago never walks. And this was walking only. It was about a 7.2 miles, and there was elevation change all
big
throughout.
Hills.
And so he was, and he's smoking cigars, and he was pretty spent by the end of the round. And I'm like, just keep drinking water, man. Keep drinking water.
Yeah.
Nibble on snacks, but don't have a big meal in between. But just, sip and nibble all the way through. So big difference.
Yeah, I remember watching the U.S. Open when it was there, and I thought that would not be an easy walk.
Yeah, but it was fun. It was a beautiful day. We got lucky. So what about complementary activities? You can call them sports if you want, but let's call it complementary activities that you can do to help support your mobility throughout your golf. And I'm thinking of things like hiking, biking, swimming. People are playing pickleball these days, tennis, basketball. Are those helpful, or are they not taking advantage of the same parts of your body that you need to work on for golf?
Great question. So, and let me make sure I'm understanding the question correctly. Do those activities you just mentioned improve your mobility for golf? Was that kind of the question?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the short answer would probably be no, unfortunately. So if we think of hiking, biking, swimming, a lot of those things you're moving in one direction where you kind of moving straight forwards, maybe swimming, there's very little rotation demands, especially in hiking and biking. Swimming, there might be a little bit. Pickleball, tennis. I would call all of those activities exercise, right? So we're working on what we call capacity. So how far can you walk? How far can you swim? You're biking. We're testing the capacity of the body's maybe muscular endurance to some degree. So when we're thinking about golf, like I said, those 4 rotary centers, Fred, the neck, the shoulders, the spine, and the hips, they all need to be able to rotate a certain amount for you to have a biomechanically relatively sound, repeatable, powerful golf swing. So if we don't have rotation around those areas, hiking and biking aren't necessarily going to help those because we're not addressing the problem, which is hip rotation. So I'm not rotating my hip as much when I'm walking in a straight line or when I'm biking in a straight line. Pickleball and tennis, we're moving. But again, that's a sort of a fitness activity, and maybe it's better than doing no movement, but you can spend 10 minutes of doing dedicated hip mobility work, and that's going to get you a lot farther than playing an hour of pickleball.
So are there activities, sports that complement golf in the way that you're trying to elevate?
From a performance standpoint, I wouldn't say any, and that would be a great study maybe to see if there were people that played 2 sports or played golf and one other sport to see if versus people that just played golf to see how much of a difference the multi-sport athletes, if their performance is better, if their incidence of injury is less. I know if someone is on a dedicated golf performance plan, so if we're addressing mobility and we're addressing strength and power, those 2 fundamental building blocks, of that pyramid that we talked about, we've got mobility at the bottom, then strength and power. The top 2 are basically technique or efficiency, and the very top one is speed. right? So we're not going to chase speed unless we've got mobility and strength and power. So if we give somebody mobility and we give them strength and power, they're going to have the best ability to perform at golf. Is playing pickleball or tennis or hiking, is it going to make them a better golfer? I think if your sole focus is getting better at golf, there's putting a little bit of attention into another, making sure those baseline things, the mobility and the strength and power, making sure that those are in a great spot. That is, it sounds really simple, and that's where most people, if you can be consistent with those basics and making sure you rotate well and that you're strong enough, which means, or I should say powerful enough, so you can jump high and you can throw far. We can create speed, then you're going to be in your best spot to perform well in golf. Now, hiking, biking, those things are great things to enjoy. Nothing wrong with those at all, but I don't know if they're going to translate to an improved golf performance at all.
Let's talk about balance and the importance of it, how to make sure that you have it and how to increase it. And
Great
that
question.
probably goes with the base, right?
Yeah, you hit it on the head. It is, most people, I would say, unless you've had an event like a stroke or something like that, where there's been an event where your nervous system is really affected. Balance is going to be more of an ability for you. Like most golfers, they say, "Yeah, I can't finish my swing, and I don't feel balanced when I'm trying to get through my swing." And again, it sounds really simple, but if we tested all those people, I guarantee you they would probably have significant restrictions in rotary mobility. Probably lead hip, that for right-handed golfer, getting onto your lead hip, and probably being able to rotate your trunk at least 50, 60 degrees in each direction. So that's where if someone can't rotate, they're going to get to those spots when they're at their end range of motion and they're 15, 20 degrees short of where they need to be. And that's where the arms kind of fling up when they swing and they don't really get onto their lead side. So most people, when they talk about having a lack of balance, especially in their golf swing, when we improve their ability to rotate, all of a sudden, 4 to 6 months later, they're noticing, hey, I can actually hold my finish now. Whereas 6 months ago, I wasn't able to do that. Those are the kinds of things that we typically see with people that are having balance issues, is that they can actually get through a full range of motion. And it might take your brain and your body a little bit of time to adopt those new sort of, I'd say, default settings for your body when you're golfing. Because you've got your swing pattern in your brain, between your brain and your muscles, or people call that muscle memory. It's not actually, your muscles don't remember anything. It's your brain that creates essentially a software program for your body to create that golf swing. So when we improve the hardware, and when I say hardware, your ability to rotate. So if we improve the parts and upgrade your shoulder, neck, trunk, and hip mobility, all of a sudden we've upgraded the hardware. We kind of have to do a software update based on the new hardware that we have in your body, so that you can actually trust that your body can get into these new positions in the swing. So that can take a little bit of an adjustment period. And people are like, wow, I hit some really, really good shots on the golf course and I just felt like I could swing through. And then some of them were, in the first couple months, it's like I hit some that were really long and straight. And then some of them kind of went all over the place. But your body's getting used to sort of those new default settings in terms of that upgraded hardware.
In the last few weeks, I started doing something that I thought, oh, I'm onto something here. This is really good, because I had balance on my mind. And so every night I use my electric toothbrush, and, it goes every 30 seconds, it beeps, and then you go to the next quadrant of your mouth, and then you and you get 4 different quadrants. So what I've been doing the last few weeks, and you're probably going to be rolling your eyes going, it's useless, Fred. But for each quadrant and each section that I'm doing I stand on one foot. And then on the next quadrant, I switch to the other foot, and I try to maintain my balance through it. Now it's gotten to the point where I use just one finger to tap on the countertop if I start losing my balance, I can just tap on it instead of holding on to it and, holding on. But I'm trying to increase my strength, my legs, and my balance by doing that, thinking that it's going to help my balance. Or am I
It probably
dreaming?
Number one,
pretty silly.
it's not silly at all. I mean,
Well, it was when my wife walked in. She goes, "What are you doing?"
Improving balance is like you can practice it, but if you're really restricted and you can't rotate, that's probably going to, I would say, shorten your ceiling for improving your balance, right? So if we improve your mobility, your ceiling for your balance will get higher. Whereas if you just practice balance, you're gonna rise to the ceiling of where your mobility's at. But if we can bring your mobility up, the ability for you to increase your balance is going to be, your ceiling will be higher. But there's no harm in standing on one foot and practicing at all.
Oh, Josh, this has been really fascinating. I thought we were going to be talking about it each age group, but it's clear it doesn't really matter. You just got to be working on it all the time for everybody.
100%. Yeah. Anybody at any age. And, we've got someone that I saw Dennis yesterday. He's one of our members in the facility, and he's going to be 82 in November. And
awesome.
he finishes his workout and then he goes out and we have a basketball net in the back, and then he shoots hoops for another 30 minutes. So it doesn't matter what age you have or what age you are, you can see improvements in your game if you do the right things. Address your mobility, address your strength and power. I mean, golfers that are listening to this, they've probably already tinkered with equipment. They might take lessons or, look at technical things on YouTube, but make sure you're addressing those physical limitations, because ultimately that's where I think the lowest hanging fruit is for most people. Again,
their website is Par 4 Success. It sounds like Par for Success, but it's Par 4, the number 4, Par 4 Success.
Par4success.com. Yeah. Or even P4S Golf. That'll direct you to the same website
P4S?
As well. P4S Golf. That makes it simple. Yeah.
Yeah. And on Instagram, Par 4 Success, YouTube, Facebook at Par 4 Success. Josh, great conversation. Learned a lot. I don't feel great about myself today. Thanks so much for joining us.
No problem, Fred. It was a pleasure.
I'd like to thank Vern Coates of Marion, Iowa for opening today's episode. Vern, now that you're a Golf Smarter ambassador, I hope that you'll invite some of your playing partners to join us next spring for 3 rounds of golf on the Robert Trent Jones Trail. I've always wanted to play there, and I hope we get to play many, many times. But for our 2025 Golf Smarter adventure, it's not just for Golf Smarter ambassadors. It's for golfers of all skill levels who love to travel and explore new courses, meet new friends who share common interests, and for many of you, escape the winter cold for some beautiful spring weather in Alabama. We'll be together from March 26th to the 30th, 2025, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be a blast. We're keeping the group to only 3 foursomes, but there's always some last-minute changes. So to get all the information, pricing, itinerary, and reserve your space, go to tmigolf.com/golfsmarter. That's tmigolf.com/golfsmarter. This week on Golf Smarter Mulligans, we'll hear part 2 with Mark Sweeney of the Aimpoint putting system. Does Aimpoint work? I'll let Mark explain for himself.
The first time I ever tested this, and I didn't really know what I was doing at the time, but I was giving a lesson and we were talking about what makes the ball break more and what makes the ball break less. And the guy looks at me and goes, you know what? Yeah, I know it breaks more, but what does that mean? Does that mean 3 feet or 2 feet or 12 inches? So I basically used the same computer software that does the line for TV, and I just had it spit out all these numbers. And I took it out and tested it. And I only did one slope, so I just did the basic 2% slope. And I went out and played 18 holes, and I think I had 11 putts on the front and 14 putts on the back. And I had never, ever been below 30 putts, and I never made anything outside 10 feet. I think I made 2 or 3 putts outside 15 feet. I made a lot more 5, 6, 7 footers. And I remember just thinking, wow, there's really something to this. I don't really understand it yet. I don't really know how to use it yet. But just the first time I ever tried it, I could not believe how much better my putting was just knowing what the proper break was.
That's part 2 with Mark Sweeney, this Friday arriving right here on the same feed you get each week for Golf Smarter. Find all of our episodes at golfsmarterpodcast.com. And if you have any questions about our adventure, updates on your own game, or suggestions for an upcoming episode, please write me